All right. Hopefully everyone can hear me. And Deborah, why don't you get started?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. This is Deborah Breitfeld, and I'm the Executive Director with the New Mexico Technology Council. And as part of our program of work, we have the Cybersecurity Peer Group. And so today we have Steady Networks. We just really want to thank Jonathan and Fiona for helping us coordinate this. And I hope everybody is doing well and staying healthy. Again, thank you so much for attending and calling in today. You can go to the next slide, please. As many of you know, the New Mexico Technology Council is a member-led organization here to support the tech ecosystem through intentional networking, programming, promotion, public policy advocacy. We support a number of workforce initiatives and really are supporting our member companies and trying to provide resources as we're all facing this challenging time. I hope you are all doing well. As you may or may not know, again, we're a membership organization and we have about 150 members really across industry sectors. We have monthly peer groups such as this, cybersecurity, data science or big data, women in technology and 3D printing. Our signature events are Experience IT, our conference that we have every fall, and our Women in Technology Awards, which we were all ready to go with for our March 26th date. And unfortunately that got postponed. We're of course working diligently to try to have that event as soon as possible. We have some really wonderful women in tech to recognize. We're very active during the legislative session on public policy related to technology issues. And then of course our biggest thing is to support our members however we can. And oftentimes we're that facilitator or that connector who brings entities together and ultimately is supporting our technology community across industry sectors. Next. Perfect, thank you. So we always want to thank our community partners and our members. Here's some of the logos of those members: City of Albuquerque, Fat Pipe ABQ, Los Alamos, at Feynman Center, Verizon, and many, many more. And we're just so grateful for your support of our organization as we continue to network and provide community within the technology industry. So thank you again, Jonathan. Oh, I also want to be sure and thank the staff at the New Mexico Technology. Mary Tiemann is membership manager. So if you're interested, we would love to have us. And Ava Montoya is our marketing and events coordinator. And she'll be putting out tweets during this broadcast. And I also want to thank, of course, my board of directors. We have a wonderful board of directors, and our program chair this year is Renee Moya from Robert Half Technologies. So really want to thank Renee for her leadership as well. So I'll turn it back to you, Jonathan. Thank you. We're really excited.
Okay. Hopefully everyone can see and hear me. Feel free to chat if you're having any issues. And dialing in seems to be the best way to get the audio if you're having any issues. So my company is Steady Networks. We were founded in, hold on, let me mute Deborah here. We were founded in 2012. We provide managed IT security services, managed cybersecurity. We work with a number of different cybersecurity frameworks like NIST 800, ITAR, CMMC, HIPAA. We work with industries like government, subcontractors, finance and accounting firms, manufacturing, law and professional services, healthcare, nonprofits, construction. We've seen a lot of different types of industries. So this is really geared towards small and medium businesses, and hopefully everyone can get something out of this around cybersecurity and some of the new and some of the old threats that we've been facing. Let's take a look at, I like to start with this slide here to kind of help people understand the difference between IT management and cybersecurity. These two things are on either side of a spectrum. On one side, you've got IT management, which is trying to ensure data is easily available to users. And then on the other side, you've got cybersecurity, which is trying to take availability away. So whenever you're frustrated or mad at one of your IT people, it's probably because they're functioning in the cybersecurity function and not the IT management. They're trying to create roadblocks for you because those same roadblocks are effective in blocking hackers and malicious actors. In the news, we've seen a lot of news about COVID and the impact on cybersecurity. Health and Human Services saw a big increase in network scanning in the midst of the early COVID-19 outreach. We started seeing right away malware that was tied to coronavirus. We saw 2,500 attacks in a day on March 16th. By March 17th, we had leaders in the cybersecurity community asking cyber criminals to lay off hospitals and healthcare workers, and even got some assurances from Bleeping Computer. They reached out to some cyber attackers and got them to say that they would always try to avoid hospitals and nursing homes, but a day later, you've got a vaccine test center hit by a cyber attack. And so there's no honor among thieves. We can't expect cyber criminals to lay off or even slow down. They're using this pandemic as an excuse to attack even more. Really, they're just being opportunistic. They're looking for ways to exploit this crisis. People are looking for information. That's a great opportunity for them to target them. And then there's this new cyber criminal risk where as people move to work from home, and we'll talk about how some of the vulnerabilities involved with that and how to prevent those attacks. But I wanted to also address this issue here, which Talos said. Talos is an incident response arm of Cisco Technologies, and they said Talos has not yet observed any new techniques during this event. Rather, we have seen malicious actors shift the subject matter of their attacks to focus on COVID themes. And I think that's really the most important thing to remember. There's nothing new that's happening here. The only thing that's new is that they're taking advantage of this crisis to create new themes and ways to talk about how to trick you into giving up credentials, installing malware, and falling for other cyber crimes. So generally, these are the cyber risks that I'm seeing, that we're seeing. People are seeking out information on the virus, which makes them more vulnerable to those attacks. There's an economic slowdown, which means people may respond to more scams. And of course, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And then thirdly, we have this massive new workforce that's working from home, and they're connecting unsecured computers to business networks. It happened without enough planning and without enough communication. Phishing attacks and email scams essentially are the order of the day. This is business as usual cyber risk. They're going to have more COVID themes, but phishing is exactly the same sport as it always was. Let me mute. Okay. Social engineering, the manipulation of people to install or steal passwords or money, still happening, and unsecured connections make you just as vulnerable as ever to attacks, and there's just going to be more of them. Who are some of the victims? Well, in Verizon, they put out a report every couple of years analyzing attacks. In 2019, they put out a report on about 41,000 different attacks, and 43% of the breaches involve small business. So you can be rest assured that if you're a small business, you are not too small to be the target of a cybersecurity attack. And what do they want? Over the past 10 years, they've been categorizing these attacks, and by and large, financial gain is the main motivation. They're after your money, and there are lots of different ways to get it, through wire fraud, through ransomware attacks. through some of you have seen gift card attacks where they try to get you to buy gift cards. So that's really the primary motivation, but they will exfiltrate your data because there's financial value to that as well. Malware types and methods. The main delivery method is 94% of the attacks involved email. Well, why is that? The traditional security method is your crown jewels. You can imagine a castle in the middle of a big moat. That's your server surrounded by your firewall and your network protections. And every day we open this big drawbridge called email, so that we can communicate with the outside world. And that email is a great vector for all kinds of attacks and allowing people access in. And then once they're in, they'll use file types like Windows applications and Office docs to gain access. So hopefully everyone by now knows the anatomy of a phishing attack, but we'll review it. We've got first step is the user receives a malicious email, an email with a malicious link or a malicious attachment. And after that, the attacker uses a fake site to collect user credentials, or they may use malware to execute code on the remote system. And then the attacker uses those stolen credentials to steal data or money, or they use malware to extract data or money, same thing. The main goals, the two things to remember about every phishing attack is that they're either designed to collect credentials to gather info or impersonate an employee or someone else in the food chain, or they're here to install malware and ransomware. Broadly, the things you want to do are not click links that you're not expecting. You want to not log in without checking the URL. You want to use multi-factor authentication. Those are the three things that'll protect you from a credential stealing attack. And if it's a malware or ransomware attack, you want to make sure you're not installing an exe file or a DMG on a Mac from your email. You want to make sure you're not enabling macros basically ever on an attachment that came through an email, and you would ideally remove the local admin access on PCs. So let me give you a couple of examples and why this is so important. Most data breaches involve weak default or stolen passwords. This is directly from Microsoft. It's all about protecting your password and preventing other users from gaining access to your email. Here's some of the CDC spoofing emails that are going around right now. Again, they're based on COVID-19 themes, but this is the same kind of attacks that we've been seeing for years. They'll have some kind of link. They'll pretend that they're from a CDC or some other type of email address. And what it does is it sends you, instead of a link to information, it'll send you to a login page that looks like an Outlook login page. But it's not from Outlook.com, it's from a third-party hacked website. They're trying to trick the users into plugging in their username and password. Here's another one with a purported link to safetymeasures.pdf, but it's just sending you to another third-party website that looks like a login website for Microsoft 365. Oldest game in the book. Your best defense is always being very aware of what that URL is that it's sending you to, so that you're not falling victim. You shouldn't be having to log in when the computer tells you to, only when you tell the computer you want to log in. It's the same kind of attack. Here's one I got last November, asking me to play a voicemail message. When I click on the link, it's sending me to this Regency Healthcare with 2 L's. It's just trying to do the exact same thing, just a different tactic for the same outcome. They want me to log in. Here's another one that purported to have a Google Drive document and a PDF. When you click on the link, it's going to a website in Poland that's been hacked for the exact same effect. Here's one pretending to be a Microsoft rectify your password expiration, but it's sending me to a website in Brazil. Exact same process. So those are the things to be aware of for these credential stealing attacks. They'll take all comers. They'll take Office 365 passwords, Outlook passwords, AOL passwords, anything you want to send them, they're happy to take. So be very aware when you're being asked to log in that you are doing it when and how and what for what purpose that you intend. There's a couple of case studies to explain what can happen if you do fall for these. I'll give you a couple of examples that happened in New Mexico within the past few years that we know personally. A CEO of a New Mexico wholesaler clicked one of these malicious links, entered his username and password. The hackers hid out for a few months, waiting to see if a wire transfer would take place. And they inserted their own change of banking information, and $70,000 went to a Malaysian bank account, never to be recovered. That's a real New Mexico hack that happened within the past couple of years. My recommendations, number one is money wire direct deposit change procedures. These should be written, communicated policies about wire transfers. They should never be fully executed over email only, and you should have a pre-established phone number for making those kinds of changes, not a phone number that's in the email, because once they're in and they are sending you to a phone number to make that change, you're part of the same cycle. Most of the financial losses that we've seen with these type of credential stealing attacks happen because of a wire transfer that happened over email. The communication happened over email. So it's really important to have a written and communicated to your team policy about how those changes happen. And then the other piece is MFA, multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication would have prevented this particular attack. What is multi-factor authentication? So if you don't know, let's talk a little bit about it. Type 1, there are 3 types of authentication factors. There's type 1, which is something you know, we're all familiar with this, the passwords. Type 2 is something you have, that's a USB dongle, a mobile phone, an authentication code. And type 3 is called something you are, which could be a fingerprint, an iris, or retinal scan. You need one type 1 and a type 2 to have, or type 1 and type 3. It has to come from different categories to be true multi-factor authentication. And here's what they look like. So if you're not familiar with them, common type 2 examples would be an SMS text code that you received on your phone. You type in your password to your bank and it sends you a code. That's a second factor because you have to have that physical phone in order to connect. Authentication apps, Google Authenticator, Windows Authenticator, there's a number of them out there. And they will pop up a code that refreshes every 60 seconds. That's another way of using two-factor authentication. And then thirdly, you could have a USB key, like a YubiKey, a physical device that you plug into your computer. The most common are the SMS text messaging codes, the authenticator apps. We recommend those for any kind of email. Do it, do it now if you can, if you haven't done it already. Microsoft touts that it's 99.9% of attacks can be blocked with multi-factor authentication. Google has similar numbers. They prefer the USB key. Second would be an authentication code. Third would be an SMS text, but they're all much more effective than doing nothing at all. I'll give you one more quick example because it's not just in the business world that this can happen. I know of a home buyer in 2019 fell for the exact same scam. She clicked a malicious link, entered her username and password. The hackers hid out in her email waiting for an opportunity, exactly the same. They inserted their own change of bank routing information when they saw that she was about to make a down payment on her house, and she lost her entire down payment to the hackers. She, because of an email, changed the routing information for a wire transfer that she did intend to make, and the homeowner that she was sending the money to never received the payment. So it can happen to a business, it can happen to a person, and that's why it's so important to use the multi-factor authentication to prevent those kinds of things. Same thing applies. Wire transfers, if you get a wire transfer change of information over email, you have to make a phone call. You should really have MFA turned on for your email to prevent the attack. The COVID-19 hacker playbook is to do this, rinse, repeat. They'll do it all day long for years and years. It's a really common attack. MFA is the fastest cure. And guess what? You can be the victim of a phishing attack even if your account wasn't the one attacked. We saw this happen last year to a New Mexico healthcare company. A New Mexico business sent an email to an insurance provider that their premium check had been sent. A response came back over email from the insurance company, directly from them, saying, our lockbox has been compromised. Do not write a check, do a stop payment, and send a wire transfer to a different account. The healthcare company, complied because of this email. Their $78,000 annual insurance premium check went to hackers instead of the insurance provider. So they were partially recovered, but they were on the hook for $53,000. They were only covered because of an insurance policy that they were able to make a claim on. So it's really important to remember that even though they were indirect victims, they were not the ones attacked. They suffered much greater harm. You have to have these policies in place around wire transfers and direct deposits, because this is the biggest scam in town. We've seen more of this than we have seen ransomware in the past year. It's probably a much bigger threat, and it could be stopped by everyone complying with multi-factor authentication on their email. Okay, but let's talk about malware, because it's a very real threat as well. Malware through phishing. Here's an example of a coronavirus themed spam phishing attempt that also used malware. This particular one had an attachment that installed a keylogger on the victim's computer. It runs a little program, and now everything they type in on their computer is being sent back to the hackers. Really, it's a variation on the theme. They're just trying to receive credentials through that method as well. How does this affect us? Well, in New Mexico hotel chain last year, a hotel employee followed a similar spoof from Cisco Foods, assumed it was Cisco Foods, opened the email attachment. It started immediately encrypting all the data on the company's server, the hotel servers, and workstations with ransomware. It impacted the ability for them to book reservations. All their guests, the key card system was down, so the guests had to be walked to their doors with a key to open up the doors 24 hours a day for 2 days. They were down with no access and lost a lot of those transactions. Now, most of their systems were replaced because they couldn't guarantee that they were clean from the malware. They were saved from paying the ransom because they had usable backups. But had they not had that, they would have had to pay the entire ransom. The tactics used, a combination, I think these are all used in combination: phishing, malware, social engineering. Commonly, there's different pieces of these being used in every attack. So our recommendation, this kind of training that we're talking about today, you need to be able to spot phishing attacks and understand what the goals are. Remove local admin access for every workstation. This is something that we do for our customers, and we highly recommend it for everyone. Additionally, disabling and training users to turn off macros. You know, there's very few uses in most businesses for macros, and those users who need them can have special training. For everyone else, there should be a process to disable those by default. It's one of the main ways that infections happen on computers is a Word document or an Excel document is sent, or PowerPoint is sent with macro enabled, and the macro is the malware. And so if you can turn off macros, prevent the macros from running, you can do a lot to protect your network. And verify backups daily. It's still great hygiene to make sure that your backups are running, that they're backed up daily, and that you have a daily copy that's moved offsite, preferably to the cloud, to a air-gapped cloud, so that if something happened and the backups were encrypted, that you would have a safe copy offsite to protect you. So generally speaking, phishing prevention recommendations, I can't stress it enough. Probably sound like a broken record, but using multi-factor authentication for email is really important. Again, SMS texting is good. Authentication apps are better. It's free in Office 365. It's free in Google Apps. There's not a real compelling reason at this point in the game to not be using multi-factor authentication. Disabling macro access, also really important. Most people don't need it day to day. It prevents malware from silently installing on your computer. And you can still have a macro for some users, but they really just need some special training. This is what that little link looks like at the top. Everyone's hopefully seen that, and they know how to enable content. Don't do it. A lot of what we see is people just do it out of habit. I even include the instructions here. You go to Excel options, Trust Center, macro settings, and disable all macros with notification or without notification. But just to make sure that you've got those turned on off by default. Another thing that we talked about is removing local admin access. We recommend, since most employees don't need it day to day, that they don't have the ability. You may have some higher level users who do need it. For them, we recommend using a second login that has admin access. You want to be able to see when something is when you have this pop up here to install with admin access. It can prevent malware from silently installing in the background, and it shouldn't impact functionality too much. Again, going back to the same concept of cybersecurity takes things away, IT management grants access. I know it makes your life harder to remove admin access, but it can really be an effective tool in preventing malware. Additionally, and this my homage to Michael Herrick, he's a big fan of haveibeenpwned.com to show users when they've had their password stolen. So if you have a chance, you can go to haveibeenpwned.com, type in your email. I've been breached on 6 sites. So what do I do? How do I always get a lot of questions about what does that mean? What does that mean? It means that you should assume your password has already been stolen. It doesn't mean you've done anything wrong or you've done anything bad. If I go to LinkedIn and I type in my username and password and they get hacked, that's no fault of my own. What is my fault is if I use the same password for LinkedIn that I use for Office 365, that I use for Gmail, that I use for Salesforce and everything else. So what do? What's the remedy? The remedy is to use a password tool so that you can have a unique password for every website and that it's not a memorable password. I'm going to talk about that. So Dashlane, LastPass, 1Password Keeper. I'm a fan of any of these that you can use. I'm going to walk through a quick demo of LastPass because I use it for free.
We use Dashlane.
Yeah.
Alan.
I hear somebody's unmuted. Let me jump through this real quick. The way LastPass works, you create a master password. The idea is that it's a unique password that you don't use anywhere else. Let me see if I can unmute whoever or mute whoever that is. The idea is that you use a master password that you don't use anywhere else, and it's a unique password because that password does get stored on LastPass's server as a hash, not in plain text. So if they get hacked and you've used that password somewhere else, that can be reverse engineered. So you want to make this a complex, unique password that you use nowhere else. Then you can install LastPass on your browser. It works on Chrome, Firefox, Android, Edge, Chromium, all of these different browsers. And now you log in, and now you're saving a password that looks like this, using a unique password like this for every site. You'll never remember it. It's never going to be repeated, and it's a great way to protect your passwords. Okay. Let's jump to social engineering. Social engineering, again, just a variation on a theme. We see this everywhere where they're trying to use the same coronavirus to entice you to click on links, install software. It often preys on people that are not at the top of the food chain to gain higher access later on. It can include phone calls. So maybe you get your salesperson gets a phone call saying, hey, I'm going to send you an email. It's going to ask you to enable a macro. Just go ahead and click that link real quick, and then you'll get my order. Your spider senses may be your best defense for social engineering. It often uses urgency to get victims to make mistakes. And again, salespeople make great victims, especially in times when orders are slow. They see our commission check is tied to an email, and they're going to be more inclined to comply. I'm going to give you a crazy example of a New Mexico procurement broker who was hacked last year. A shoe retailer who was not the broker, their email was hacked. The hacker negotiated the purchase of over $1 million worth of shoes, and the broker reached out to the manufacturer to place the order. The order was sent from the manufacturer to the hackers via an out-of-state rental storage company, and the product was delivered to the hackers. The retailer who supposedly placed the order, who was hacked, they never even knew that the order was placed. The manufacturer never knew that there was an order that was fraudulent. The broker sitting in the middle of this ordeal, they were on the hook for the cost of the entire order. Again, they were not the ones hacked. It was the retailer who was hacked, who the hackers pretended to be placing the order. Same sort of situation as wire transfer fraud. You have to use common sense. You have to be able to pick up the phone. You know, that salesperson should have been more suspicious. There had never been an order that big placed. The entire order was made over email. You have to be suspicious of these things. And salespeople can be some of the most vulnerable to these social attacks. All right, finally, we're going to talk a little bit about working from home and some of the unique challenges associated with that. So we've got personal computers in the mix. They present a certain challenge. We have remote desktop happening. There's challenges associated with that. VPN, log me in, go to my PC, and then we have some other higher level security control issues. Let's talk about personal computers first. So our number one recommendation, and something that we've really cracked down on in the past few weeks since we've seen this massive number of users working from home, is we really recommend that you never use a VPN from a personal computer. It may seem, maybe some of you already had it set up on there and say, what's the big deal? And these are the risks. A VPN connects your personal computer directly to a corporate network. You're gonna have lower malware defenses on there. You may be local administrator on there. You may have children accessing that computer or teenagers. We don't know what the patch status, the antivirus status is. And if you've got shared drive access, you may be taking personal, or your employees may be taking personal or corporate information, dragging and dropping it onto their desktop for ease of use. Now that information is out in the wild on a computer you have no control over. So we really recommend that you don't use the VPN from personal computers. That you only, if you're going to have users and employees accessing the network, that they're using log me in, go to my PC, those types of remote access that create a firewall in between the personal computer and the corporate network. It may even be risky for an all SaaS environment, meaning a personal computer that's accessing just Office 365, NetSuite, Salesforce, browser-based apps. I know you may be inclined to allow users to do it. There's some risk if you had a keylogger or malware on the personal computer. It is possible that that information could get out, that access could get out. So those are some of the threats with personal computers. Let's talk a little bit about remote workforce risks with VPN. So VPN, we really do recommend VPN that creates a secure channel in between the laptop of the machine that's at the home office to the corporate network. We do recommend that you use two-factor on VPN, and that you never use VPN. Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. That you don't use VPN from personal computers. You're only using it on managed corporate devices for all the reasons we talked about. Another thing to keep in mind, if you are the owner of the company or the IT manager, that VPN servers have known vulnerabilities. So you want to make sure that those servers are staying patched and updated regularly, and that you've got some of these alerts on failed logins, some of the ability to monitor for when somebody is attacking your system, that you're aware of those things. New things that we have to consider that maybe we never had to think about is how many concurrent users can log in at the same time. Most VPNs are designed for a small number of users historically, and now we're asking entire companies to work remotely to log into the VPN. How much bandwidth are they using? Those are things that we need to consider now that maybe we didn't have to consider in the past. And remote desktop protocol. Hopefully, many people have had the use and access to RDP servers, so they feel like, hey, I'm ready to go. I've already got remote access to my network, so there's no problem there. Remote desktop port is historically a really vulnerable connection when it's not used together with a VPN. We've seen this as recently as a couple years ago, with port 3389, which is the default port. Maybe I'm getting a little technical here. Hopefully some people know what I'm talking about. If you don't close those ports, a hacker can brute force attack, send as many passwords as they want to that port until something breaks free and gets them in. So you really want to make sure if you're using remote desktop connection to get into a terminal server or into your computer at the office, that there's a requirement that there's a VPN first. You connect to the VPN, then you're on the corporate network, then you have access. You want to have the ports locked down for RDP. Again, never use VPN from personal computers, and alert on failed logins. Another thing we recommend is that you limit, we've chosen the number 7 because it gives people a couple of tries to make a mistake, but not so many tries that they can brute force. You want to limit in your network how many times a user can try to log in unsuccessfully. You don't want to make that unlimited because a hacker will just try a few billion times before they get in. Remote workforce risk, number 4 is log me in, go to my PC, TeamViewer, Splashtop. There are a lot of these types of applications suddenly being put into action. And there's a couple of things that people need to know about. Number 1, a password app. We really recommend that you use password apps to protect the access, like we talked about earlier. Most of these applications, the good ones, all have 2FA, multi-factor authentication for login. Definitely use that. If you have corporate accounts with Log Me In and go to My PC, it's a little more expensive, but it will let you restrict access by IP. So you can say, user number 2 can only access from their home office. Anyone else trying to access is going to be blocked. And that's a little higher level security that you can impose. Same thing, they all by default alert on failed logins. Another thing that people don't always think about is remembering to blank out their remote screens. A lot of us have offices that are pretty empty right now, but if you don't black out the remote screen, then anyone sitting in front of that computer can see what's happening. So it's a good idea to blank that out. Last word before we take some questions. Still, perhaps the most critical tool in cybersecurity is backup, and it needs daily verification. So if you don't already have something in place that backs up, verifies it's a usable backup, and that it sends a copy someplace else automatically offsite with an air gap, that's another really important piece. All sins can be forgiven if you have good backups. Well, most sins, so that's another really important thing to remember. And there's always more you can do. There's SIEMs, which are new technology that looks at every kind of log, trying to use artificial intelligence to see if you're under attack through something more sophisticated than just a brute force. There's vulnerability scans you can do on your network to make sure that you've got patch levels in place. and other known vulnerabilities accounted for. You can always take cybersecurity further, but hopefully some of these tools are the ones that you'll take into consideration for doing the most basic things to protect your network during COVID and hopefully beyond. So hopefully that has been helpful. I wanted to address some of the biggest risks that we're seeing out there, and I'm happy to take some questions. We got about 15 minutes left, and I wanted to see if anyone has any questions. You can chat them. You can ask questions on the side panel. I'm happy to answer anything anyone might have, or if you want to raise your hand and try to be very brave, we can unmute you and see if you want to ask any questions there.
Jonathan, I have some questions from people.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, we have Kristen. She was wondering if she could get the PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, sure, no problem. I'm happy to send that out when we're done, and there'll be an audio recording of the information as well.
Okay. And next, Mark Fidel, he actually had a quick question for you as well. He consider having a specific bank account just for wire transfers. Folks should not wire out of operating account. The wire transfer account should be funded only when a wire is going out, correct?
Great idea, Mark. That's a good point. You know, it really depends on how your business functions, how often you're doing wire transfers. For something like the horrible case with the woman who lost her down payment, that would have been great advice. But just realize that those wire transfers are probably the biggest money stealing scam. We've seen it happen with payroll companies that have been hacked. We've seen it with companies that have been hacked that use wire transfers. We've seen it with companies that don't typically use wire transfers, and we've seen it with a law firm who one of the partners emailed allegedly the office manager and said, "Oh, I just want my paycheck sent to a new account. Here's my new direct deposit information," and paychecks started going into this fraudulent account. So again, the thing that they all had in common is someone in the food chain did not have multi-factor turned on, and the communication took place entirely over email without anyone picking up the phone to verify that the information was correct.
Thank you, John. Celia actually asked permission if she could utilize your slides with her supercomputing challenge.
Sure, yeah, of course.
Sure, there you go. And Caleb, he was wondering, do you have a preferred password manager? We use RoboForm. Would you say any others are better for enterprise? Thanks.
No, the things that you want to have in place are a complicated master password that you do not use anywhere else, because again, they can be reverse engineered if RoboForm were to get hacked. Number two is you want multi-factor, that same multi-factor authentication on your RoboForms that you would have on your email account. It also needs to be behind a two-factor, multi-factor authentication to provide that extra security. So they can't just get a hold of your email and get a password reset, and now they don't have one password, they've got hundreds of passwords.
Thank you. And I have Connie, who asked if she can have the section, of course, that was covered on the email address that has been hacked.
Sure, yeah.
That seems to be important, no problem.
Yep.
And Dominic, can you comment on the use of upstream DNS servers like OpenDNS?
Yes, so we use OpenDNS for all of our customers, that particular brand, which is now Cisco. But the concept is this, that especially when you're in an office, you can make the DNS managed by a filter, so that it just gives you an extra layer of protection. So cybersecurity is not a one-stop shop. You need layer and layer and layer and layer and layer. And the challenge is we have to keep adding layers as we compete in this arms race with the hackers. So OpenDNS is a great tool. It's great one of those layers. You can either use it by making the main DNS, meaning where your firewall in your office sends all requests. It goes through this filter. But an OpenDNS has a laptop and desktop agent that can also take control of where your DNS forwards. So if you go to Google or wherever.com from your laptop, if you have this agent on the laptop, it's doing an additional filter to make sure you're not going to a known bad site. And so, yeah, OpenDNS is a great extra layer of protection. I'll never say don't use a tool that is a known tool. It's just it's this balancing act again between cybersecurity, IT management. How do we let people get their work done without imposing too many restrictions, but enough that they stay safe, and that we're not spending so much money that we can't afford to keep our employees safe.
Thank you. And I also have a message from Deborah. She
Okay.
asked, should you have Chrome remember passwords? Where is the best place to store document passwords?
That is a good question. I don't have a perfect answer on it because I've not done enough research. My concern is I don't know exactly how Chrome stores those passwords. I've just not personally researched it. LastPass is the one that I've looked into. I know that they don't store your password; they store a hash of your password. So they, if their systems were breached, I know that that particular system, if it's a unique, complicated password that's not duplicated basically anywhere else in the world, then it's safe. But I don't know enough about Chrome to really answer that. I apologize.
And where would you suggest the best place to store document passwords?
Document passwords. Do you
Store
know what
or
that?
document passwords.
Oh, again, I like these apps that are cloud-based, that don't store your password, your master password, that are behind two-factor. Any of them that I listed, I think could be recommended. And it's possible that the Chrome password, I don't personally use it. Again, I don't know enough about it, but the concept is ideally the same, that you've got it, it's hiding behind a two-factor and a complex password that is not used anywhere else.
So Suli has actually asked, I guess on everybody's behalf, if the copy of the slides could be sent to their emails. And I also know that Deborah had asked if we can post it up on the NMTC website. What is our approach to this?
Yeah, I'll work with Mary and Deborah to get that posted, and I think
Okay.
we'll give us a little time to render the recording, but we'll send out a copy of the recording to everyone who attended as well.
Thank you. And is there anything, this is from Chris, should I do anything with my router to improve security?
You could use something like OpenDNS. The main thing to look at is, especially with home routers, is there are known attacks, known vulnerabilities. So you might do a little research on your particular router to see if there's known vulnerabilities, make sure that it's up to date. You can update the firmware on a router depending on the model. The ease of doing that is dependent on the model, but there are some known vulnerabilities. If you did a search for the make and model of your router, you probably could find out if there's an update for it or if there's known vulnerabilities for it.
I guess we need to ask everyone if they have any other questions. I've read all the ones that have come across to me by questions, chat, or email. If there's anything else, please send it over so Jonathan can answer.
Sure. And I've got my contact information up there as well. You can go to our website, steadynetworks.com, and reach out to myself or Fiona through the sales line. And Again, we work with about with over 1,500 different endpoints across New Mexico, and we've seen a lot of different types of hacks and security risks in a lot of different industries. So we've got a broad range of experience seeing a lot of different things. So if you've got a question, I'm happy to answer it offline as well.
We have two more questions, or three more. Two from Trish. She says, seniors top tips. That's the first question.
Ooh, I mean, my number one tip for everybody is multi-factor authentication, as we've talked about. It's so important, and I think the resistance we get is that it's a little bit complicated. But what I usually remind people is that almost, I think by now, every bank account that you log into via a website now uses two-factor authentication, usually with an SMS text. And so I think all that's doing is getting people more used to that technology, so it's not quite as intimidating. We are a fan of SMS texting for two-factor. Again, if you look at Google's research on it, it wasn't quite as effective as an application, an authentication app, or two-factor or a USB key, especially when it was a known person that was being attacked, a targeted attack. If you feel that you're unlikely to be a targeted attack, SMS texting is pretty effective. It's free on Gmail, it's free on Outlook.com, it's, I believe, free on Yahoo. So turning that multi-factor authentication on for your email would be my number one tip for really anybody, because it solves a lot of problems preventing people from getting access to your email account, which holds the key to so much information.
Also, another question from Trish. What do you do when you see these scam emails?
I honestly, I just ignore them and delete them. Sometimes I take pictures of them, screenshots of them, so that I can use in presentations like this. But there's no value in me responding to them. There's no value in me sending them to the FBI. I have talked to the FBI to see if that's of any value. I think they put it in the circular folder because they have so many other projects they're working on. And so I am a big fan of ignoring and deleting. You can mark it as spam. Sometimes that's effective as well. But the most important thing is to know to spot them, to recognize that they have no value to you, and to move on.
Thank you. And I also have a question from Roger. Do you do cybersecurity reviews of work at home stations?
Not really, no. Which is the reason why it's so important to not connect directly with a VPN into our customers' corporate accounts. Now, that said, you should be using an antivirus at home. You should be doing Windows or OS or Mac patching, getting that up to date on your machine. If you want a free scanner to do a one-time scan, Malwarebytes is a good one for a one-time scan. They have a paid version as well. I recommend, at a minimum, a free antivirus, better yet, a paid one. So patching and antivirus and scanning occasionally, or regularly, I should say, would be my best recommendation. But because it's too much for us to reach out to every individual and see what they're doing, I make those recommendations. And if we can air gap between a corporate network and a personal home computer, we recommend that as well.
I have another question from Deborah. Does Office 365 have MFA?
Absolutely, 100%. And we now require it for all of our customers that it's turned on. And I'll admit we got some pushback initially, but one of our customers gave us a lot of pushback, and then one of their users got hacked. the week that we were discussing this, and they said, all right, I get it, turn it on. Again, you can use SMS texting. So all that happens is occasionally when you log in, especially to a new computer, it doesn't happen every time because it does have the ability to remember computers. So it's when you connect to a new computer or a new phone, a new device, that's when it pops the MFA and sends you a new code. But if you're just on the same computer using Outlook every day, it's not going to send you those codes. They're trying to make it as little annoying as possible. Again, that balance between IT management and cybersecurity. We got to find a way in the middle where we can live with these challenges and these obstructions while staying safe.
Thank you. I now have a question from Mary.
Okay.
How do you feel about Dashlane for passwords?
It was one of them that I mentioned: Dashlane, RoboForm, LastPass, 1Password. Any of them, the main name brand ones that show up on like page 1 of Google are all going to be comparable, good, reliable. It's the concept and the process that we really want to recommend, is that you're using unique, complicated passwords, one for every different website, that you're not duplicating passwords. Because what happens is a big breach, Facebook, LinkedIn, Home Depot, Target, any of these websites get breached. Marriott, 5.4 million, just yesterday announced 5.4 million credentials leaked onto the web. If you have a Marriott account and you've used that same password for any other website, now they can start trying to use that password against you. That's why you have to have a unique password for every website.
Trish had a follow-up question. Is there nowhere to report these people or how hold these attackers accountable?
The question is, how do we hold them accountable?
Yes.
All we
She
can do
wants
is
to know how to report them.
It's a good question. FBI is technically the correct branch of government to report them, and you're welcome to do that. They do have a hotline. They do have the ability to send them information. But I've worked with the local Albuquerque FBI before with some of these specific cases that we talked about, and there was very little that they could do, whether it was tracking down Bitcoin, whether it was tracking down a actual wire transfer. I had one case that I heard about through a peer group where a Chinese bank was the recipient of the hacked wire transfer, and the CEO happened to be in China. He drove to the bank to stop the transfer himself. That's the only case where I've heard of one of these wire transfers being stopped. So the FBI is probably the best place. I don't want to discourage anyone from reporting any of it. I just want you to temper your expectations about any kind of immediate action that's going to take place to resolve it.
What type of cybersecurity magazine do you recommend as a resource, if there is any? That's from Sonia.
There's a lot of online resources. There are government, the ones that are run by the government, and I can try to append this maybe with them, but there's a few government resources. Microsoft has a great security blog, and as does Google. But there's a lot of resources out there that are pretty reliable. Most places reporting on this, and same thing with most antivirus have good blogs as well, reporting on cybersecurity. But again, following some of these processes that we've talked about today you don't need to know the specific threats that are out there for these things to be effective.
And I think, we have one more question. Oh no, it was a repeat one, so we're good. I think we have addressed everything everybody has asked. And if they need to ask us more after, do you recommend our phone number or our emails or both?
Yeah, whatever works for you. Go to our website, fill out a form, call, email. we're happy to chat. But thank you for everyone for your time, and have a great day. Be safe, and I hope you have a great day.
Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.